vigilance, the action or state of keeping careful watch, standing guard, defending the bulwark between the righteous and the godless.
If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. If we are to guard against ignorance and remain free, it is the responsibility of every American to be informed. That was the great Thomas Jefferson. Now, speaking of being informed, speaking of being responsible citizens, speaking of being responsible Americans, responsible Idahoans, I would like to talk about 4 principles that I think are essential to liberty. The first principle is the principle of deity. You see, our money says, "In God we trust." Our Declaration of Independence says that we are created by a God who granted certain rights. Our own Bible says that we were created male and female, that we are created in the image of God. You see, there is a God, and God is at the head. And if we want to be free, we have to have a relationship, a respect, and an understanding of who He is and what our responsibilities are in relationship to that. Now, that's how our founding fathers believed. You see, one of the first things that Congress did after the forming of the Republic was to write the Northwest Ordinance. Section 3 reads, "Religion, morality, and knowledge, being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged." Now, it's my belief that when men make lists, they tend to prioritize them. And so let's look at this list that they put together. It says religion, morality, and knowledge. I believe that those were placed in that order on purpose and for a reason. First of all, religion. What is religion? Religion is an understanding of who God is and who we are in relationship to God. That is religion. Second on the list was morality. Morality is an understanding of our duties before God. Our duties as they affect the way we act toward God and toward each other. That is morality. And finally was knowledge, worldly knowledge. Now you see, if you reverse the order, if you put knowledge first, people gain worldly knowledge, and without the tempering effect of religion and morality, they can use that knowledge for any manner of evil. But if people have knowledge tempered by religion and morality, then there's a better chance that that knowledge will be used for good. Principle number 2, the principle of creation. You see, there is a eternal rule with regard to creation. God created man. Now, when God created us, did He give us all of His powers, or did He give us only a limited subset of powers? Are we everything that God is, or are we something less? Well, that answer is obvious. We are something less. Therefore, the Creator, God Himself, is superior to His creation, the people. Now, this rule holds fast in every aspect of creation. I cannot find a single incidence where this rule does not apply. The people created the states, originally the 13 colonies. Did the people give the states all of their powers? I mean, think about it. Did the people give the states power over how their children will be taught or educated or what religion they will be taught? Of course not. The states were less than the people. Therefore, with regard to the relationship between the states and the people are the sovereign and the states are the lesser. The states got together. Delegates from 13 colonies came together in Philadelphia and they wrote the Constitution of the United States, thereby creating the United States of America, the federal government. Did the people give all of their powers to the federal government? Or did they, in fact, in Article 1, Section 8, list only a certain number of topics upon which the federal government may create laws? You see, the states kept their superiority, and the creation, the federal government, was less. This is always the case, and And yet we've turned it around. We have the federal government telling the states what to do and the federal government telling us, the people, what to do. It's just backwards, and we've got to correct that. Principle number 3 is the principle of delegation. Now, this is an important one to understand. We see government getting involved in things, and we say, that doesn't seem right. Why are they doing that? Why are they doing this type of thing? Well, one of the keys that we can use to determine whether they have authority to do so or not is to understand the principle of delegation. You see, the Declaration of Independence states that governments gain their proper powers by the consent of the governed. Everything they have, they get from the consent of the governed. Now, can we give something we don't have? Of course not. Let's look at a simple example. Business licenses. Virtually anywhere in the United States, if you're going to go into business, you have to have a license to do so. The government says so. But where did the government get that power? And so you have to ask yourself, if government gets all of its powers from the people, and if I, as one of the people, cannot force my neighbor to get a license before he can open a pet grooming shop, then where did the government get their power? And the simple answer is, if the people don't possess the powers in and of themselves, then the federal government cannot exercise that power. And if the federal government is exercising a power, or not just federal, but if any government is exercising power that the people themselves do not have, then that government is usurping power. That government is creating power out of thin air and exercising power in and of itself, which it was never delegated. The final principle is actually closely related to the principle of creation, but this is the principle of sovereignty and subjection. In the relationship between God and people, God is the sovereign, and the people are in subjection to Him. And this follows right on down through the different layers of creation. In the relationship between the people and the states, the people, the Creator, are the sovereign, and the states are in subjection to us. And finally, in the relationship between the states and the federal government, it is the states who are sovereign and the federal government in subjection. And again, we have gotten this all just backwards.
Freedom is not free, but I can help. I offer a set of fundraisers that include advanced firearms training, defensive law seminars, constitution workshops with a focus on the local solution. Now, why the local solution? It's simple. Government of, for, and by the people must always be close to the people. Hey, give me a call, 208-317-9843. Let's talk freedom.
So, how do we, the people and the states, exercise this sovereignty? It has been clearly explained to us from a number of sources, and I'm going to share a few. James Madison in the Virginia Resolution stated that it is the state's duty to interpose. And then he went on to explain that when the federal government takes any action outside of those few limited powers that it was delegated, that the states have a duty to interpose, to literally step between the federal government and the people in their states and say, this law, repugnant to the Constitution, is void. It will not be recognized inside this state. The people of this state shall never be in subjection to this law. And the states can do that because, remember, the state is the sovereign and the federal government is in subjection. Thomas Jefferson, at the same time that James Madison was writing the Virginia Resolution, wrote the Kentucky Resolution. And the Kentucky Resolution is pretty interesting. It said that all laws created by the federal government which are repugnant to the Constitution are void. Then he went on and he said nullification is the rightful remedy. And his description of nullification is in perfect harmony with that of James Madison. And that is that the law repugnant to the Constitution has no force or effect inside the states, and it is the state's duty to step up and nullify those laws. Now, again, looking at the principle of creation and delegation, if the states have the power to nullify, where did they get that? They got it from the people. And therefore, not only do the states have the power, but the people do. And it is our rightful remedy when the federal government or the state government steps out of line. But Thomas Jefferson and James Madison didn't invent the idea. Federalist supporters of the Constitution at the Virginia Ratifying Convention in 1788 assured Virginians that they would be exonerated should the federal government attempt to impose any supplementary condition upon them. In other words, if it tried to exercise a power over and above the ones the states had delegated to it. Patrick Henry, and later Jefferson himself, elaborated on these safeguards that Virginians had been assured of at their ratifying convention. So you see, nullification was in place and understood even before the states ratified and accepted the Constitution and became a part of the Republic. About that same time, there were a group of writers who were writing newspaper articles, which have come to be known as the Federalist Papers. Alexander Hamilton was one, and he wrote Federalist 78. And I quote him, "There is no position which depends on clearer principles than that every act of delegated authority contrary to the tenor of the commission under which it was exercised is void. No legislative act, therefore, contrary to the Constitution can be valid." To deny this would be to affirm that the deputy is greater than his principal, that the servant is above the master, that the representatives of the people are superior to the people themselves, that men, acting by virtue of powers, may do not only what their powers do not authorize, but what they forbid. You see, Alexander Hamilton understood this principle even then. That government may exercise delegated powers only, and any other exercise of power is void. It has no force upon the people.
You will fight as you train.
Now, going back to Thomas Jefferson. Have the people chosen to be ignorant and free today? I believe that a close look at the Republican and Democratic nominees for the presidency make it clear that we have done exactly that. Let's listen to Donald Trump from the first presidential debate.
We have to bring back law and order. Now, whether or not in a place like Chicago you do stop and frisk, which worked very well, Mayor Giuliani is here, it worked very well in New York, it brought the crime rate way down.
Stop and frisk. We need to understand what that is. You see, it's based on a Supreme Court decision, Terry versus Ohio in 1968. Now, it was a decision by the United States Supreme Court which held that the Fourth Amendment prohibition on unreasonable searches and seizures is not violated when a police officer stops a suspect on the street and frisks him or her without probable cause. Whoa, wait a minute. Think about this. It just said that the police officer stops a suspect. Well, how can that person be a suspect if there's no probable cause? And if there's no probable cause, can that police officer really stop and frisk a person? Instead of turning to this unconstitutional abuse of power, Terry versus Ohio, let us instead turn to the Constitution itself. And it reads, this is in the Fourth Amendment, it reads, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched or the persons or things to be seized." You see, the Constitution requires that there must be probable cause, and even with probable cause, there must be a warrant. And that warrant must limit the search and the seizure to specific things or people. Terry versus Ohio is a blatant violation of the Constitution, and Donald Trump loves it. Now, let's hear what Hillary Clinton said in that same debate regarding crime control and gun control.
And I believe strongly that common sense gun safety measures would assist us right now. And this is something Donald has supported along with the gun lobby. Right now, we've got too many military style weapons on the streets. In a lot of places, our police are outgunned.
Too many military-style weapons on the streets, and in a lot of places, our police are outgunned. For crying out loud, what is the intent of the Second Amendment? The intent of the Second Amendment is simply this, that the people always be able to outgun their government. You see, that's what keeps government in check. When the government is afraid of the people, there's freedom, there is liberty. But when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. Tyranny. Hillary Clinton loves that idea. So the question is not who is worst, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. The question is this: what will we do about it? And we go back to Thomas Jefferson's rightful remedy. You see, Butch oughter be talking about this. He oughter be taking a stand. He oughter be declaring that Terry versus Ohio is void in the state of Idaho. The Constitution declares that all legislative power is vested in Congress. Then how is it that we are subject to rules and regulation written by agencies and never reviewed by Congress? How is it that these rules are given full force of law? Butch oughter be declaring that all agency rules, from the BLM, the Forest Service, the EPA, the FDA, the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, the ATF, and more, are void and without force in the state of Idaho. The Constitution declares that all legislative power is vested in Congress. Yet the Obama bathroom edict, the executive order that placed boys in bathrooms, locker rooms, and showers with our daughters, is here and it's in force. And was there any resistance from Idaho? Not so much as a whimper. Butch oughter know better. Additionally, every seated state and federal legislator must be shouting this message from the rooftops. Every person running for a seat as a legislator, state or federal, must be declaring this truth and educating the people. But they will not. The reason is that the people as a whole have chosen to be ignorant and free. And so they want something that never was and never will be. And as long as ignorance is our choice, our lawmakers will have no reason and no motivation to choose any but the easy path. Whether Hillary or Donald win the White House is not important. Either way, the long train of abuses will only become longer. Our only hope is for the people to understand these four principles as I've explained them, and then find the courage to get up on your feet and make your voice heard. I'm Lance Earl. I'll see you soon.